The afternoon sun flattened the color out of the Carolina Classic Car Show, and a rust-bitten pickup rolled into the lot, engine coughing. 3 men in navy blazers turned. One lifted his phone, another said it loud enough for the row to hear. "Somebody call an ambulance," he laughed. "We got a guy lost on his way from the junkyard." 20 steps off, Adeline Brookhart stepped out of a black SUV, coffee in hand. The driver did not flinch. He opened the truck bed and lifted out a polished chassis model, metal catching the late sun, the way a man lifts a sleeping child. The whole lot was laughing at him. The only person not laughing was the most powerful one there. What did she see that they had missed? 5 hours earlier, the garage on the edge of Wesley Holloway's lot was already lit. 5 in the morning, a single bulb burning over a workbench cluttered with wrenches and printed schematics, and on a folding cot in the corner, a 7-year-old girl named Lily slept under her father's jacket. She had wanted to come down with him in the dark, the way she always did when school was out, and he had let her because the garage was the warmest place in the small house, and because he liked having her near. Wesley lay flat on his back beneath a 1969 Mustang. But he was not fixing it. He was redrawing its suspension geometry from the ground up. A wrench in one hand and a digital measuring tool in the other that did not belong in a garage like this. The tool had cost more than the truck out front. He worked without music, without coffee, his breathing low and even, and every few minutes he glanced toward the cot to make sure his daughter was still asleep. The walls of the garage were covered in hand-drawn schematics, layered 3 deep in places, the bottom layers yellowed with age. In one corner, half hidden behind a newer drawing, the bottom of an older sheet showed a faded logo, the logo of a Formula One racing team. No one who walked into the garage ever asked about it. Wesley had arranged the layers that way on purpose. By 6:45, Lily was awake, dressed, eating cereal at the small kitchen table, while her father packed a cardboard box lined with felt. The school bus came at 7. Their neighbor, May, 60 years old, gray hair pulled back, watched Lily from the porch on the days Wesley had to be out late. May had asked him once, leaning on her own railing with a coffee, whether he was running from something or hiding from something. Wesley had not answered. He had only smiled, a small one-sided smile, and looked at the trees. On the refrigerator, held in place by a magnet shaped like a wrench, was a notice from the bank. Final demand, $34,000. 10 days. Wesley had walked past it that morning without slowing. Inside the garage, Lily had asked her father, the night before, about the Mustang taking shape under his hands. "Daddy," she had said, "can this car race?" He had set down the wrench, put his hand on the top of her head, and looked at the half-built chassis with something like memory in his eyes. "Faster than anything you've ever seen," he had told her. She had nodded, like that was simply the truth. Now, in the morning light, he settled the chassis model into the cardboard box, wrapped twine around it twice, and tied it with a knot that did not slip. Lily, at the doorway with her backpack on, asked him quietly, "Will anyone buy it?" He looked at her. "Don't know yet," he said. But before he closed the lid, he looked at the model for one full second, the way a man looks at something he has carried alone for a long time. The Charlotte skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling glass of Brookhart Motorsport Ventures, and inside the top-floor boardroom, Adeline Brookhart was running a meeting the way her father had once run pit crews. No wasted questions, no wasted feelings. The acquisition file in front of her was for an IndyCar team valued at nearly $400 million, and the men around the table understood by now not to talk unless they could improve the silence. To her right sat Grant Morrow, 45, technical director, sharp suit, sharper smile. He moved through his slides with the easy authority of a man who had been believed for a long time. Adeline trusted him. She had inherited some of her father's instincts and most of his discipline, but she had also inherited his blind spots, and Grant Morrow had spent 10 years learning the shape of those blind spots from the inside. The meeting was nearly closed when Adeline's assistant slipped a note across the table. A guest, unannounced, was waiting in the lobby. The guest's name made Adeline lift her head. Rafael Diaz stepped into the boardroom a minute later. 3-time Formula One world champion, 54 years old, silver at the temples, carrying nothing but a small wooden case. He set the case on the table, opened it, and lifted out a scaled chassis model. The polished metal caught the boardroom light. Adeline, who had grown up around models like this, who had watched her father turn one over in his hands the night before he died, felt the small pull of something she could not name. He had come, Raphael said, because he was building a final project. A restoration of a chassis from the early 2000s, a design that had quietly changed the sport without ever being credited to the right name. He wanted to meet the engineer who had actually drawn it, the original mind, not the signature on the patent. Grant smiled at the right moment, the way he had been smiling at the right moments for 10 years, and said simply, "I'm the designer. I'd be honored to meet whenever suits you." Raphael did not look at Grant when he answered. He looked at his own model on the table. "We'll see," he said. "I'll be in Charlotte through the weekend." Adeline noticed where his eyes went, where they did not go. She filed it, the way she filed everything, and said nothing. When the boardroom emptied and Grant was on the phone in the hallway, Adeline rode the elevator down with her assistant. On the way to the parking deck, she said, "Find me everything on this chassis design, who registered it, when, and where the original files are stored." The assistant nodded, already typing. Outside, the sun had climbed. Charlotte was warming. Adeline got into the SUV and told her driver to head to the car show on the south side. She did not know why Raphael had refused to look at Grant, but she had learned, watching her father work, that the people who avoided your eyes were almost always telling you something. By early afternoon, the Charlotte show had filled with restored Mustangs, polished Camaros, men in linen jackets, women with sunglasses pushed up on their foreheads. Wesley Holloway had set up his table at the far end of the second row, the simplest table on the field. No banner, no flyers, just the chassis model on a black cloth and a small white card next to it with his name and a phone number. Lily stood beside him, in a t-shirt with a tire tread printed across the front, polishing the model with a soft cloth she held in both hands. She worked carefully, the way she worked at her drawing book at home, her tongue caught between her teeth. Every now and again she stopped to point at one of the finer struts and ask her father a question, and he would crouch beside her and answer in a few quiet words she would nod at as if storing them away. Adeline arrived with the Brookhart team. This was a networking event, and her presence here mattered. Grant was beside her, tablet in hand, still finishing his pitch about the IndyCar acquisition. Adeline listened, but her eyes traveled across the field, and they paused, just once, for 1 second, on the simplest table at the far end. Something about the man behind it sat oddly against the rest of the field. He stood the way a man stands when he no longer expects to be addressed. Grant kept talking. Then, mid-sentence, he stopped. His eyes had found the same table. His face did something small and quick before he covered it. He changed direction and walked toward Wesley with his usual easy stride. Adeline followed without registering that he had turned. When Grant reached Wesley's table, he made his voice carry. He wanted the row to hear. "Still doing this," he said, smiling like an old friend. "I thought, after that whole thing, you'd hung it up for good." He turned to the small group that had begun to gather, lifted his chin, and spoke as if he were telling a long-running joke. "This man," he said, "once applied to my engineering team. We had to turn him down. Couldn't pass the basics." A few people laughed, the polite, performative laugh that crowds give a man with a tablet and a tailored jacket. Someone took a picture of the simple table, deliberately framed to humiliate. Lily looked up. She did not understand all the words, but she understood the tone. Her small hand slipped into her father's hand and held there, and she did not look at the strangers, only at her father's face, watching for the answer she would learn to copy. Wesley did not flush. He did not explain. He looked at Grant for exactly 3 seconds, his eyes flat as a calm pond, and Grant's smile faltered, just for half a beat, before he made it stick again. Then Wesley looked down at his daughter. "You okay?" he asked, low. Lily nodded, slow, eyes still on him. He laid his hand on her shoulder, said nothing else, and turned his face back to his table, as if the conversation had ended without his participation. Adeline stood 4 steps away. She watched Grant laugh. She watched Wesley not laugh. She watched a small girl tighten her grip on her father's hand. Her face did not change, but she did not walk on. She had spent 20 years learning to read the rooms her father had taught her to read, and the room around this one simple table was telling her something she had not been told back at the office that morning. The crowd thinned slowly. the way crowds at a humiliation always do, embarrassed once the show is over. Wesley stood behind his table without inviting anyone, without explaining anything. Lily had gone back to polishing the model, more slowly now, her shoulders a little smaller than before. A man with white hair and a thick gray cardigan paused at the table. He had the careful posture of someone who had spent his life around precision instruments, and he leaned in toward the chassis model the way a watchmaker leans toward a small mechanism, his hands kept deliberately behind his back so as not to touch what was not his. He examined the underside and asked two technical questions, the kind that separate hobbyists from engineers. Wesley answered him in two clean sentences, no extra word, no flourish. The white-haired man straightened. He looked at the model again, and then at Wesley, with a quiet look that lasted longer than was comfortable. He opened his mouth as if to ask one more thing, then closed it. Then he nodded, slowly, twice, and walked on without saying another thing. 3 minutes later, Rafael Diaz drifted into the row, alone, no assistant. He did not stop because of a sign. He stopped because of the model. He stood in front of the table for 30 seconds in pure silence, his hands behind his back, his head tilted slightly, the way a man listens to a piece of music he hasn't heard in years. "You made this," he said. "Yes," Wesley answered. "The angle of attack on the front wing," Raphael said. "Why did you choose 4.2 degrees instead of the standard 3.8? Wesley looked at him for 3 full seconds. "Because the Charlotte road surface has a friction coefficient of 0.87 in April," he said. 3.8 loses 0.3 of a second per lap. Raphael did not answer right away. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, then settled. Then his face shifted, slow, and he smiled. The first smile in his whole long afternoon. He looked at Wesley the way a man looks at something he has been searching for without admitting it. Lily had crept around the corner of the table. She tilted her head up at the gray-haired stranger and asked, very seriously, "Do you know about racing?" Raphael bent slightly toward her. "A little," he said. She nodded, accepting that. "My dad knows more," she said. Raphael did not laugh. He looked at Wesley, and his voice was quiet. "I know," he said. A few steps away, Adeline stood with her phone in her hand and was not looking at the screen. She had heard everything. The angle of attack, the friction coefficient, the small girl's quiet certainty. She watched Rafael Diaz, the man who had walked away from sponsors and presidents because they bored him, bend his attention down toward the simplest table on the field. She looked at Wesley, and she tried to fit him into the report her assistant was already preparing in the back of an SUV outside, and she could not. She did not feel respect, not yet. What she felt was the first soft click of doubt against everything she had believed about her own house, and the click did not go away when she turned her face back toward her own team. Across the row, Grant had seen it too. He set the tablet down on a folding chair without looking, and his free hand closed slowly into a fist, and then opened again, and stayed open at his side, useless. 3 days passed quietly, which was the worst kind of quiet. On the 4th morning, Wesley pulled a thick envelope from his mailbox. The bank's final demand, $34,000 within 10 days, or the house in the garage went to auction. The garage was the only home Lily remembered. Her mother had died there, on a hospice bed in the front room, 4 years before. He read the letter once. He folded it. He put it inside his jacket pocket and went back to work, because there was nothing else he could do at 8 in the morning that was not already too late. By that afternoon, the photograph from the car show had begun to spread. It traveled across a regional Reddit thread, then a Charlotte area Facebook group. The caption was cruel in a soft way, the kind of cruelty that wears a smile. Grant did not post it himself. He shared it carefully to 2 accounts that he knew would multiply it for him, men who had owed him favors for years and never quite asked what the favors were for. A small local paper picked up a paragraph about a strange man at the Charlotte car show with a homemade model. Art project, the writer joked, or wrong address. Lily came home from school that day and did not slam the door. That was how Wesley knew. He looked up from the workbench. She set her backpack down without taking off her coat, the way she did when something at school had made her smaller. Then she sat at the kitchen table and opened her notebook, but she did not write. He came over, sat across from her. "Lily," he said. She kept her eyes on the notebook. "A boy in my class showed me his phone," she said. He asked if it was you. Wesley reached across, gently lifted her chin with 2 fingers. Lily looked at him with eyes that were too steady for a 7-year-old. "Can they take our house, Daddy?" she asked. He did not lie to her. He never had. "No," he said, but his voice was softer than usual, and she heard the softness, and her chin trembled once, just once, before she said it. That night, after Lily was asleep, Wesley sat at the small desk in the corner of the living room, the bank letter open in front of him. He did not weep. He did not curse. He sat very still for almost an hour. Then he opened the bottom drawer of the desk, lifted out a thick brown folder, and placed it on the table. He did not open it. He laid his hand flat on top of it, the way a man rests his hand on a coffin. He sat there a long time. Then he closed the drawer and went to bed without turning on another light. In a corner office in downtown Charlotte that same night, Adeline Brookhart was reading the report her assistant had quietly produced. Wesley Holloway, 38 years old, address on the western edge of the county. No verified university degree on record, no employment history with any registered firm, no name on any patent, any technical paper, any conference roster. Almost nothing. She read it twice. She set it down. She turned her chair toward the dark window and watched the lights of the city, and she thought, very quietly, that no man with that report on file had any business answering Rafael Diaz the way Wesley had answered him. The math did not work. She picked up her phone and then set it down again. Not yet. Not until she understood her own house first. The 4th morning after the car show, a rental sedan pulled up outside Wesley's garage. Rafael Diaz climbed out alone. No driver, no assistant, the silver in his hair catching the light. He walked into the garage without calling first. Wesley was on his back under a customer's old sedan, only his legs visible. Lily sat at a wooden table 6 feet away, working through her math homework, humming a song under her breath that did not have a clear tune. The garage smelled of motor oil and warm metal, and the faint sweet trace of the apple Lily had eaten at lunch. Raphael tapped a knuckle twice against the metal beam beside the lift. "We need to talk," he said. Wesley slid out from under the car. He stood up, wiped his hands slowly on a shop rag. He did not look surprised. He looked at Raphael, then at his daughter. "Sweetheart," he said, "go sit on the porch with Miss May for a little while." Lily nodded, gathered her notebook and walked out, but at the door she turned and looked back at the man with silver hair, just once, with the careful attention of a child sizing up a stranger. When the door closed, Raphael did not waste time. "I saw your chassis 10 years ago," he said. "I saw the design. I have known, for 10 years, who actually drew it. I stayed quiet because I had no proof strong enough, and because Grant Morrow had lawyers, and because the man who was hurt by it had vanished from the industry without leaving a forwarding address. But when I saw your model at the show, and I heard you answer me about the angle of attack, I no longer had any doubt." Wesley did not nod. He did not deny. He sat down on a low stool by the workbench and looked at the concrete floor. "What do you want?" he said. "I want you to redesign the chassis for my final race car," Raphael said. "A personal project. Your name does not have to appear anywhere. I understand you may have reasons." He set a thick envelope on the workbench. $200,000, he said, "as a retainer. It would solve what is in your mailbox." Wesley looked at the envelope. He looked at his own hands, still holding the rag, still streaked with grease he had not finished wiping. Through the open garage door, he could see the porch, where May was sitting beside Lily, listening to her hum. Lily's small voice carried in, faint, a thread of song against the afternoon. He stood up. He picked up the envelope. He walked it back across the bench and set it down in front of Raphael, slowly, with a kind of finality that did not need volume. "I don't work in the dark anymore," he said. "The last time I did, somebody took 10 years of my life." The garage went still. Lily's humming drifted in from outside, small and far away. Raphael did not move for a long moment. He looked at Wesley, as a man looks at someone whose price is not what he had assumed it would be. There was no offense in his face, no irritation, only a slow recalibration, the way a man with long experience adjusts to a fact he had not expected. Then he nodded, not in agreement, but in understanding. He picked the envelope back up, and as he stood, he said, "Then, I need to take one more step. He left without saying what the step was. Wesley stood in the doorway and watched the rental sedan pull away. Behind him, on the workbench, the bank letter was still folded inside his jacket pocket. The clock in the garage ticked once again, and the day kept going. Outside, Lily looked up from the porch and watched the dust settle along the road. Raphael came back the next afternoon. He brought a laptop and a small black thumb drive and set them on the workbench between them. "This is what I have found," he said, "in 10 years. The thumb drive opened a folder full of emails. Internal correspondence between Grant Morrow and the legal department of the racing team Wesley had once worked for as a contractor. The language was careful, the kind of language lawyers use when they know a paper trail will outlive them, but the intention was unmistakable. Grant had drafted a contract with deliberately vague language about intellectual property. Then, after Wesley had delivered the chassis design, Grant had used those vague clauses to strip Wesley's name from the patent registration and put his own there instead. The dates lined up cleanly. November of 2014. The signatures matched. The reply from outside counsel sat in the chain in plain text. Hold for 90 days. After that, the transfer is binding. Wesley sat and read. His face did not change, but his hands, which had been resting easily on the bench, settled flat, palms down, fingers pressed into the wood as if to keep something inside himself from rising. When he had finished, he did not look at Raphael. He spoke at the workbench. "I did not give up," he said. "I was pushed out. Grant came to me with an offer. Sign a non-disclosure. Walk away with a small payout. No lawsuit. No years in court. I signed." He paused. "My wife was in her 3rd round of chemotherapy that month. I needed money. I needed time. I needed to be home." He stopped. "She died 6 months later." Raphael did not say anything. He did not offer comfort. He looked at Wesley with the look of a man old enough to know that some losses do not want words laid on top of them, and that the wrong word at the wrong time would only make the listener carry it twice. While they sat in the garage, in a glass office tower across the city, Adeline Brookhart was at her desk with a slim folder open in front of her. She had been comparing dates on Grant's old patent records all morning, and she had found one detail too small to matter to anyone who was not already looking. The original digital file for the chassis had been created 17 days before the patent was filed under Grant's name. There was no engineering reason for that gap. Drafts that close to a patent filing did not sit untouched for 17 days. They were updated daily, hourly. A clean draft for filing meant an active engineer. An active engineer left fingerprints. The 17-day silence in the file was, itself, a fingerprint of a different kind. She picked up her desk phone and called the head of IT directly. "I need the original archive file, pulled from cold storage," she said. "I need the metadata. All of it. Author tag, creation timestamp, every revision." 2 days, the IT director said. She thanked him and hung up and did not tell anyone else. She sat for a moment with her hand still on the phone, and she understood that whatever was in that file was going to cost her something inside her own company. Back in the garage, Wesley stood up. He walked to the desk in the corner, pulled open the bottom drawer, and lifted out the brown folder. He set it down in front of Raphael. "I kept it all," he said. "Every page, every day." Raphael opened the folder. Inside were handwritten engineering journals, sketch pages, daily design notes, all scanned and filed by date. The first page he saw was dated November 4th, 2014, 3:14 in the morning. Revision 7. Front wing, 4.2 degrees. The handwriting was neat and small, the way a tired man's handwriting becomes when he has trained himself to be careful even when exhausted. Pencil annotations crowded the margins, tiny corrections, a small drawing of a coffee cup beside one calculation. The kind of doodle a man makes at 4 in the morning to keep his eyes open. Raphael closed the folder slowly. He did not say anything for a long time. Outside, on the porch, Lily had stopped humming. She was watching the stranger's car through the screen door, the way a child watches something she does not yet know whether to like. The technical pitch meeting at Brookhart Ventures was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Rafael Diaz had agreed to hear a formal presentation from Brookhart's engineering team, with the implicit understanding that if it went well, the contract for his restoration project would follow. The room was glass on 3 sides, and through the western wall, The Charlotte skyline took the late light and turned it gold. Grant Morrow stood at the head of the long table. His slides were polished, his voice calm. He had been preparing for this meeting for a week, and he had walked into the room that afternoon with the quiet, settled confidence of a man who had already decided how the next 2 hours would go. Adeline sat at the chair's seat. The IT preliminary report had landed in her inbox 2 hours earlier. Anomalies confirmed in the metadata. Verification still in progress. She had told no one in the room. She watched Grant the way she watched everything, which was carefully. The doors opened. Raphael walked in, and Wesley walked in beside him. Adeline saw Wesley through the glass before he reached the threshold, and for 1 second the meeting stopped existing in her head. Raphael introduced him with a single line. "My independent consultant," he said. Grant looked at Wesley. His hand tightened on his pen, just once, then relaxed. His face stayed exactly where it had been, a face that had survived 10 years of small private panics by refusing to move. Grant began his presentation. He moved through it well. He did not rush. Raphael listened without interrupting. When Grant pulled up the chassis design and walked through the engineering rationale, Raphael nodded slowly, a few times, and then turned his head slightly and said, "Do you have any comments?" He was looking at Wesley. Wesley stood up. He did not ask for the remote. He did not ask for permission. He walked to the screen, his footsteps the only sound in the room, and he pointed at 3 specific points on the schematic, 3 small marks that no one in the room except him and Grant could read at first glance. 3 places on the drawing where a tired man had once known a coming failure was hiding. "The number 2 strut joint will fail at lap 14, he said, "if the road temperature exceeds 38 degrees Celsius. This is an error from the original draft. The version on this screen has not been updated." He paused, his eyes still on the schematic, not on Grant. "Revision 7 corrected this. This drawing is older than Revision 7. The room went silent. Adeline looked at the screen. Then she looked at Grant. The phrase Revision 7 was in the IT report on her tablet, sitting in her lap, 3 lines from the top. Grant's voice came in, just a beat too late, and just a half step too high, the way a man's voice comes in when he has rehearsed the wrong sentence. "You don't have the standing to stand here," and Wesley turned his head. It was the first time, since walking into that room, that he had looked directly at Grant Morrow. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Revision 7, he said. Timestamp 3:14 in the morning, November 4th, 2014. Account name W. Holloway. You can have IT pull the metadata right now." Then, into the silence that followed, he added one more sentence, and he did not look at anyone when he said it. "I know that drawing word for word," he said, "because I drew it at 3 in the morning while my wife was in chemotherapy in the room next door." No one moved. No one looked at Grant. Adeline set her pen down on the table, slowly, without making a sound. Outside the glass, the Charlotte skyline kept turning gold, indifferent to whatever was breaking inside the room. Somewhere, 2 floors down, a phone was ringing, and the sound of it climbed up into the silence and went nowhere. Adeline did not raise her voice. She lifted her hand once, the smallest gesture, and the meeting paused around her like a held breath. "Excuse us a moment," she said to Raphael. Then she turned to her assistant. "Bring in IT. Bring in legal. Now." 2 minutes later, the head of IT was at the screen with his own laptop, projecting the original archive file onto the wall. The metadata bloomed across the glass in plain white text. Author, creation timestamp. Modification history. The author tag read W. Holloway. The creation timestamp read November 4th, 2014, 3:14 a.m. The ownership transfer log showed a separate entry, November 21st, 2014, account ownership reassigned, new owner account, G. Morrow. The IT director read the entries aloud, line by line, without commentary, the way a man reads numbers off a meter. Each line landed in the room with the weight of a small piece of evidence laid down on a table. 7 days, Adeline said quietly, after Wesley had signed his non-disclosure agreement. Raphael laid the thumb drive on the table without ceremony. Email after email opened in sequence on the wall. The careful legal language, the deliberate vagueness in the contractor agreement, the internal note from Grant to outside counsel, asking how aggressively the IP clause could be interpreted. The reply, advising that as long as no one contested it within 90 days, the transfer would hold. Grant's voice, when it came, was thinner than it had been 10 minutes earlier. "He signed," he said. "The contract was legal. He signed it." Adeline turned in her chair. For the first time since she had hired him, she looked at Grant Morrow not as a colleague, but as something to be removed from a room. "Legal does not mean right," she said, "and I do not run this company by climbing on the back of a man who could not afford to fight." She turned to the head of legal, who had just walked in. "Escort Mr. Morrow out. Begin a full audit of every patent filed under his name in the last 10 years. Today, Grant did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He looked once at Wesley, who was not looking back at him, and then he set his pen down on the table, very gently, and walked out of the room. The glass door swung closed behind him with a soft hush. Nobody watched him go. Wesley reached for his own laptop. He opened the folder he had carried into the meeting, and he projected the handwritten engineering journal onto the screen, page by page. Daily notes in small, careful handwriting. Sketches with timestamps. Revisions numbered and dated. Pencil annotations in the margins. The journal looked like what it was. A man's record of his own work, kept honestly, kept for himself, kept for no one else. He spoke to the screen, not to the room. "I did not keep these to use today," he said. "I kept them because they are the only thing I still have from the years when my family was still whole." The room held still around him. Adeline looked at the screen, at the small numbers in the margins, at the dates that climbed week by week through that long, terrible autumn, the fall when his wife had been dying and he had been drawing 4 in the morning by the light of a hospital corridor. She understood, finally, what she had been looking at since the car show. The man on the screen did not need anyone to believe him. He had simply needed, once in his life, to be seen correctly. Raphael stood up. He walked the length of the table, around to where Wesley stood, and he did not offer his hand. He did not need to. He stood beside him and looked at the screen, and that was the answer. The contract Raphael set on the table the next morning was the kind of document Wesley had not allowed himself to imagine for 10 years. Lead engineer. Full design authority. $8 million for the chassis design and the build supervision. And, written in the first paragraph, in plain English, the name. Wesley Holloway. Listed correctly on every document, every published paper, every public filing. No silent roll. No hidden signature. No clause buried at the bottom of page 7 that would, 3 years from now, walk his name back into the dark. Wesley read it through. He did not rush. When he reached the end, he looked at Raphael for 1 second, and he nodded once. Raphael nodded back. Neither of them reached for a handshake. Two men who had already understood each other did not need the gesture. Adeline found him in the hallway as he was leaving the building, after the contract was signed. There was no one else in the corridor. She did not give him a long apology. She had thought about a long one, on her way down in the elevator, and had decided against it. He was not the kind of man a long apology would land on, and she was not the kind of woman who used words to manage something she had simply gotten wrong. "I did not see correctly," she said. Wesley looked at her. There was no anger in his eyes, and no clear forgiveness either. "Most people don't," he said. She held out her hand. He took it. 1 second. Then he let go. Neither of them said anything more, but she stood in that hallway, watching him walk to the elevator, and this time, when the doors closed in front of his face, she was looking at him correctly, and he could feel it, even with his back turned, even through the glass. She stayed there a full minute after the elevator was gone. When she finally turned and walked back toward her office, she was thinking, for the first time in a very long time, about the kind of company she actually wanted to run. Wesley drove across town in the late afternoon. He pulled the rust-bitten pickup into the loop in front of Lily's elementary school, and the engine ticked down into its familiar idle. He did not get out. He waited. Lily came running through the front doors with her backpack bouncing on her small shoulders, and when she saw the old truck, she ran the last 20 feet at full speed and launched herself at the open door. He caught her. He held her for a second longer than usual. Then he set her on the passenger seat and reached across to buckle her in. She looked up at him with serious eyes, the same serious eyes she had watched him with at the car show that day, the same eyes that had asked him whether they could lose the house. "Did anything good happen today, Daddy?" she asked. He turned the key. The old engine coughed once, settled, and held a steady note, the way an old engine does when its owner has loved it long enough. He looked straight through the windshield, out at the line of cars ahead of them, out at the soft Carolina afternoon. Somebody finally saw correctly, he said. Just one person? Lily asked. One is enough, he said. He pulled the truck out of the school loop. The old pickup rolled into the line of Charlotte traffic and disappeared into it. Just another rust-bitten old vehicle on a long, bright road, indistinguishable from 1,000 others, except for the man behind the wheel, the small girl beside him, and the quiet, settled thing between them that the world had finally stopped trying to take away.